Hello out there, Michelle Houghton. I am signing on at both Copic in the Craft Room as well as Rubbernecker YouTube channels with this new video, Ethel Cooking. This is another beautiful Rubbernecker stamps. This is from their old characters collection, and I had colored one up a few weeks ago, and here is a second one from that collection. She, to me, is a little sassy. Got a little spark in the eye. You don't know what exactly is going in that stew, but it's going to be good because Grandma is cooking in the kitchen. So I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to apologize right from the get-go. Because I'm so close, you're going to lose the marker lid on occasion, but I will try to have that marker number in that lower left corner, and I will verbalize what I am doing. So we've got a BV23 that I am underpainting with, or kind of getting that under color with. I feel like, especially with a little bit older skin, putting this underneath the skin tones actually works really, really well. It grays those skin tones down a little bit, which I think is a little more authentic. But it also, you can do any of your skin tones this way, where you add some of those blue violets or light violets underneath the other skin tones. So what I'm doing is I'm looking for those darkest areas. I'm looking for the creases along her laugh line and along the edges of her face, back of her neck, down below her collar, the underside of her arms, and then the bottom edges of those hands. So you can see I do that fairly slowly. This is all real time, so you're going to see how quickly I am doing this. This particular recording I am voicing over, so you're not going to get quite as much chitter chattery as if I was coloring, because I don't tend to ramble as much when I'm doing this voiceover. E31 is the color I am basing all the skin areas in. Now this is the lightest layer. I am going to work up to darker in this particular one, but I'm going to go ahead and do all the skin areas. And you could do one section at a time. I know a lot of people will do like the face and the neck. They'll finish those all the way out, and then they'll come down and do arms and or legs as separate sections. It keeps them moving a little bit quicker through the colors. And if your ink is wet, meaning you have not let it sit for a long time, it is easier to blend, and you will get smoother blends. So if you're a little bit slower, you're still learning, or you just are slower at coloring, it might be a good idea to do one section at a time. E33 is coming in next. This is going to go pretty close to where that BV 23 was laid down, but it's going to go a little further. So you're going to see that come in, but go a little bit further than the BV23. Now you're going to notice with this layer in particular that that BV is softening even further. It's that underlying layer creates that gray, but as I put those layers on top of it, it does kind of get fuzzy, softens up, and becomes a true underlying layer. The darkest layer I'm adding on the skin tones is an E25. So I've jumped to an E2 because I feel like this has a really rich, beautiful earth tone to it. And this is going literally right on top of those areas that had that blue violet. So you're not going to see it extend further. It's going to stay right into those darkest areas and go right on top of that blue violet that we underpainted to start. Next, we're going to hit reverse and work back through our colors. So the first one is an E33. You're going to notice I'm going to start in the E25 area and work out onto the E33 area. And I'll even extend a little further, almost covering up that E31. So I'm leaving these little tiny spots of the E31 left behind. But this is going to extend, and this is going to end up being the majority of that skin tone that E33 is. We're going to step back one more and go all the way back to E31, and then I am circling into those highlight areas, and it's going to bump into the E33. So these areas are really small at this point. It's going to blend back into those darker areas. Notice I extend into those darker colors. It's going to keep that smooth. Darker skin tones take longer to learn how to manage. Those darker colors just take longer to get nice and smooth. So don't give up on it. Practice it. This is something I've been working on for a few years, and each time I do it, it gets better. And each time I sit down and try it, I have one that doesn't work out. So give yourself some grace and keep working on it. Decided to add just a hint of color to Ethel's lip and her cheeks. I'm going to use an R83 for this. I typically will use something a little bit lighter, but I wanted you to actually be able to see that color, so I'm working that in. Now behind her glasses, the artist has left the glasses so we can't see the edge of her face. So these are pretty hefty prescriptions. So I'm going to come in with that lightest skin tone, which is the E31. And then I'm also going to use a colorless blender, and you're going to see me do that here in just a second. I'm bringing that in right to the center of each lens and pushing the color out just a little bit. It's going to wash it out a little bit, and it's going to give that effect of that magnified eye or skin and skin area behind the lenses. Next is E50, and I am going to put this loosely, kind of with some squiggles or scribbles in Ethel's hair, but I'm going throughout her hair. She has a touch of color, so she's gracefully going to gray and has a little hint of color that she adds in on a regular basis. So she's still got a little hint of earth tone, but then we're going to add some warm grays, and I'm dotting in W1 to start. There's a few squiggles happening, but mostly dots since this is such a small image. And I work all the way throughout the hair with that W1. W3 is next, again, some small squiggles and dots. This is going to start shaping that hair, so it's coming in kind of on the bottom edge and up into some of those curls to show the separation between those different curls. I added one more layer of color on this image with the hair, and that was a W5, and this is very limited, but I felt like it was still really washed out with the colors that I had done so far. So kind of as a last minute, I added some W5, And I'm taking the artist notes on this one. I'm focusing it where they have put those little scribbles kind of along those bottom curls, and then adding a few at the top to separate those. Didn't want to forget her eyebrows, and I'm going to go ahead and use the C5 so you can see that they're gray, or W5, sorry, these are all W's, in her hair. One of the things you're going to note about this image is there is a lot of little details going on. So we're going to kind of run through these. I'm starting with her dress. We've got a B41 that's going to base the dress. Then I'm going to use a B43 to add shape. You're going to see me try to make her look round and plump. And then I'm going to soften that coming back with the B41. Working on Ethel's apron next. She's got an E50 as the base color, and then I'm going to use two more E's, an E51 and an E53 to give that some shape. We want to keep her looking curved. So you're going to see that, and then I will work backwards. I skip the midtone in this case. I go straight back to the E50 to blend. These are all pretty close together, so it works pretty efficiently on this particular combination. The label on the wine is going to get a few colors on it. E31 is first, and then I'm going to lighten down the center of it with the E50. So instead of going back with a colorless blender, I'm going to go back with a really light earth tone. And then at the edges, you're going to see me add some E33 and blend those together. So then she's got these little cuffs on her dress and a collar. I left those white and I used a BV20 and then a colorless blender to soften those to give that little bit of white. I'm also going to circle on the bottom edge. I'm going to pretend like these are pearls. So you're going to see me come in with an E93 on the top edge, because a lot of times you'll see that kind of peachy color ranging across the top. Colorless blender will be on all of those white areas, including the pearl earrings. And while I'm at the white, I'm also going to come in and hit these eggshells with a little BV20 and colorless blender as well. The egg carton is going to be the E3s again, E31 for the base color, E33 for some of the shadow areas, and I'm going to blend some of that back with the E31 again. Have some cool grays coming in next. C5 is going to start the big stew pot. Then I'm going to use a C3 and C1 to finish that. I don't necessarily need a crisp highlight on this particular one because I don't know that it would be shiny. I have a feeling she's a woman who uses her cookware and that this one is well loved. So it's not necessarily going to have that crisp highlight that would indicate a shiny metal. So working through those C's, and then you'll see me blend those together if needed. a quick touch of E31 on her spoon. Got a little wood spoon stirring in there. And then I'm going to shift back to the cool grays to hit the knife. So the knife handle is going to start with a C5, and then after I do the blade, I'll come back with a C7 on that. The blade itself is going to start with a C3, and I'm going to fill in, but I'm going to come right up to those diagonals and leave that open. And I play around with this a little. I didn't really have kind of in my head what I wanted this to completely look like, so this was me playing a little bit. So you can see I've left those two little white highlights, and then I am going to come in with a C5, and I kind of gave it this little bit of a texture on the blade itself, and I ran that same C5 kind of along the back edge. I'm just playing, you can tell. I'm not really sure what I'm doing. I'm kind of playing around with color at this point. And then I'm going to use the colorless blender in those little highlight areas to kind of brighten that, but also soften kind of what's going on either side of it. And I like the look of that. So I went ahead and went around along the cutting edge of the blade as well, because I liked how it was softening that texture, that you could kind of still see some of those little details, but that it softened it and kind of blurred it together. So I ended up liking the effect, but it definitely was a happy accident. So then back comes the little bit darker touch on the handle, the C7. I'm going to blend that in with a C5, and that little knife is finally done. The tabletop is going to be kind of a butcher block, so a wood, and I'm starting with an E21. I'm going to base that entire area, so that's going to take a few minutes to get all the way colored. You could do this with the chisel or the broad nib on your sketch marker or chow marker, whichever you are coloring with, and either will work just fine, but nice broad strokes. It doesn't need to be totally even because I'm going to add texture, but I do want it to be horizontal because that's the way the boards are going to be running on this particular tabletop. Ready for some wood grain. I am coming in with E23. I'm using the very tip of the brush nib, and I am very quickly, you can see how quickly, kind of running these little lines back and forth in between the objects to get that wood grain. The trick is running up into the objects, because if I stop right up against or right before I get to them, you end up with a halo effect around your object. So you do have to run it right up to the edge, and if that means starting at the object and flicking out, but you're literally running that marker very gently along the paper. So get your hand down on the page and kind of slide it along to get those nice fine lines. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to add another layer to the wood grain. And I started by maybe thinking a W5, but I felt like it was too dark. So I came in with a W3, again, running very quickly back and forth, wiggly, allowing that to kind of brush across the surface. Then I'm coming in and starting to add some cast shadows. You're going to see me play with this area a lot as well because I did not do any practicing beforehand. So I'm determining how dark do I want them? Do I want the edges fuzzy or do I want them crisp? So anyway, you're going to see some playing here because I wasn't quite sure when I started laying this down what I wanted exactly. So starting with a W3 and then going from there. So the wine bottle is still sitting and a few other items on the counter. I'm going to use an R59. She's using a little red wine this evening. And then you're going to see an R37 and some colorless blender to kind of finish that off. A little bit brighter white highlight on that shiny bottle. And then you're going to have some greens in here with the R's to finish off the other details. I'm going to start with a YR23. This is either a block of cheese or it could be a box of baking soda. I'm not sure, but I was just trying to think of some colors that would really work well together on this countertop. So we've got some warm yellow reds, and I'm going to kind of work my way across several of the objects because I feel like at this point I've got so much going on that I don't want to add a whole lot more color. I have to add some more because there's so many pieces going on, but I want to keep it as simple as possible so that it doesn't look too disjointed. So that's the YR23, and then I'm going to come in with a YR24 to add a little bit of shape to each of those objects. Quick touch of C5 on the can that she has open and has poured into her stew, and then coming back in with some greens. All right, I've got a G94 on the second bottle. This one is not going to have as distinct a highlight, but it'll have a small one off to the side. G99 is next. Now, if you remember that first number, so that first 9 means that this is a very desaturated color. I mean, it has quite a bit of gray added to it, so it's kind of a washed out, darker, and the darker part is the end 9 in there. But the first 9 signifies it has a lot of gray in it. So it's not a real bright green. It's a gray washed out green. A little bit of colorless blender. Then I've got a G85, which is going to come in and do some more green details in the picture. I decided that little bottle in front is kind of an Italian seasoning shaker, and so it's getting a little bit of that R37 in it, and then I'm coming back with the G85 again to soften that up. And there is Ethel. She is cooking away. Obviously, you could definitely do a background on this. I have not in this particular case because we have been coloring for a while. Everybody have a happy, colorful day, and I hope to see you soon over my blog or over at one of the YouTube channels.